Let's get one thing straight. This is my gig. You want your share? We play by my rules.
The Lost Legacy is a type of game I'd love to see more of. It's a mid-sized adventure, but it was priced noticeably lower than a new full-length title would be. It took me approximately 7 hours to beat. While that's shorter than most games of this type, knowing ahead of time that it started life as a DLC for Uncharted 4, I was impressed by how complete and feature-length the adventure felt. It's certainly longer than certain other PS4 exclusives that were sold at full price at launch. Nathan Drake's life of adventure is seemingly behind him. Uncharted 4 saw him out in a way that I found to be genuinely reflective and respectful, assuming that is in fact the last chapter in his saga. But it's a fact of life. Drake or not, every protagonist in the Uncharted universe has the kind of luck that sees them running from guerrilla militias and crawling by the skin of their teeth atop the priceless monuments of the ancient world. By this point, the Uncharted series is a well-oiled machine. Coming into this, fans know that the set pieces are at the heart of the Uncharted experience, whether you're climbing up an astonishingly precarious 1,000-year-old wall or witnessing urban violence. In fact, I remember Uncharted 3 being criticized for leaning so heavily on its epic set pieces that the plot suffered, as seen in the ship graveyard sequence that was impressive both visually and as a level, but which had nothing to do with the plot. Uncharted 4 righted the ship by bringing the story back home to the characters, as well as drawing parallels between these modern-day treasure hunters and the swashbuckling pirates of another era. In carrying on the series' tradition, The Lost Legacy is not found wanting for that factor. Whatever your opinions on everything else this series has to offer, you have to admit that the dogs know how to frame a shot. Chloe Fraser controls pretty much the same as Nathan Drake, which is no real surprise considering both protagonists use the exact same movement engine. Chloe brings lockpicking to the table, which uses a fairly intuitive and simple rotate to find the pressure point mechanic. And just like when Isaac Clarke pulled out a similar mechanic in the Dead Space games, you'll occasionally be doing it under pressure, which makes me glad the mechanic is so straightforward. Much like with Drake's adventures, the plot deals with Chloe Fraser and Nadine Ross attempting to beat a cadre of bad men with big guns to a lost artifact of the ancient world, in this case the Tusk of Ganesh, which affords the game a nice Indian aesthetic, in a modern city as well as the sprawling ghats and ancient temples. If you enjoyed the segments of Uncharted 4 that took place behind the wheel, then you'll want to buy The Lost Legacy as soon as you can, because once the game leaves the city behind and hits the ghats, the off-road vehicle will be your main method of getting around to the various sites of interest in the second act. As for me, I find it okay. I'm one of those players with such an abysmal sixth sense for direction that I'll be causing my own experience to stutter by checking the map every few moments just to make sure I'm not veering off course. But the drivable area itself isn't so big that you'll feel like you get swallowed by it. The places that you need to hit are very clearly marked, and in most cases it feels more or less like a jaunt from A to B.
Want me to drive?
Nope.
I don't mind.
I do. It's a control thing. This one was pointing
Just like all the Uncharted games before it, The Lost Legacy uses companions, in this case Nadine, to banter about while you're adventuring. It helps the game feel less empty, because when you're driving from point A to point B, there really isn't a whole lot in the map other than the beautiful scenery itself and the occasional gunfight and pickup to keep you alert, so the banter helps it keep feeling like a real living world. Nadine can be a pretty useful companion when she punches out an enemy who is about to blindside you, or in this simple puzzle where you're scouring the landscape for a bunch of switches, she actually found and activated one of them before I did. There were some weird moments where her character model being in the wrong place at the wrong time led to some awkwardness, but those moments were few. Nadine, please.
Don't stop! Keep moving!
If we divide the Uncharted formula into three broad segments, exploration, combat, and puzzles, combat's probably my least favorite of the three. While the cover-based shooting of the previous game still exists, stealth is clearly emphasized in some earlier sections, with some later sections being more about straight-up shootouts. Now, I'll put up front that I'm not the best one to judge stealth sections. Yes, I'm bad at them, but it's that weird kind of bad where everything kind of goes to hell, and I emerge not really sure of what I could have done differently. I'll play Assassin's Creed 3 and end up getting chased by more redcoats than on the average episode of AMC's Turn. I do enjoy a bunch of games that have stealth elements boiled into the framework, but I find that I like those games in spite of the stealth elements, not because of them. I do like stealth as a narrative tool, just not when I try and play it. In this first shootout in the GAT, I had actually managed to ghost every thug except one, and then he saw me and a horde of dudes came out of nowhere for me to fight. That's... And while you're given a fair variety of guns to play around with, I found the straight-up gunfights to be a little chaotic for my blood. I don't know what it is, really. I don't recall having these issues with past Uncharted games, even though the combat is fundamentally the same. I hate to say this, because I try to judge games on what they are rather than what they're not trying to be. But maybe the fluidity and ease of use of combat systems like those in Bloodborne and the 2016 Doom have spoiled me for modern combat and gaming just a little bit. In comparison, combat like this just feels a bit unwieldy. But hey, that's just me. And maybe that's the way it's supposed to be. You're not playing as a legendary badass or a hunter half-cut with blood. You're an exhausted adventurer in over your head on unfamiliar terrain. If you've cut your teeth on this kind of combat, you'll be fine. It's not an albatross around the game's neck or anything. You'll get that reference if you're a fan of epic poetry or Iron Maiden. As with any Uncharted outing, the puzzles range from fairly simple, like these spin the symbol pedestals, to reasonably complex. I don't want to talk about how long it actually took me to figure out this shadow puzzle. My favorites were definitely these statue puzzles, where you need to jump across a series of platforms around these weaponized statues, but each landing causes the statues to either shift positions or swing their weapons. Not only is it interesting and fun, but it follows good game design to a T, being lenient enough to let you practice, and easing you into the mechanic with a simple variant before ramping up the complexity. As usual, you can pick up little trinkets along the way that help enhance the flavor of the world, but this is, I don't want to call it a criticism of the whole series, more of a nitpick, and that is that these trinkets don't really feel like they have any in-game value or weight to them. You can go look at them, zoom in and rotate them, and that's it. I do wish that at some point along the line, Uncharted had taken a cue from the new Tomb Raider games. The tertiary little artifacts you get in those games come with a quick narration from Laura describing the object, and you can rotate those objects to discover hidden elements, which gives you a little bit of XP. It's just a minor quibble. At the end of the day, The Lost Legacy is Uncharted doing what it does best. By no means is Uncharted by numbers a bad thing when, like The Lost Legacy, the series understands why people enjoy it and keep coming back to it. Sure, there's nothing like the genuinely unsettling horror elements that took many of us by surprise in the last third of the first Uncharted, but The Lost Legacy is solid and tightly woven. This late in a series whose later games have offered additional polish but otherwise have stuck to their guns, it can be difficult to think of new things to say, but maybe that's looking at it from the wrong angle. Instead, I should think of it as a reaffirmation of why I find this whole genre so endearing in the first place. The brisk pace, the banter, the epic set pieces, and that tasty blend of myth and history. People often tend to call these types of games cinematic experiences, either as a compliment or as an insult, but I think it's accurate. A good Uncharted game leaves you with the same kind of feeling as a good blockbuster movie. As you watch Nathan or Chloe scale these crazy sets, you can almost taste the lightly buttered popcorn. I think there will always be room for games like that in my entertainment diet. And without trying to get too macrocosmic on you, I think we should applaud developer practices like this every chance we get. We should shout it from the rooftops when a developer does this and let them know that we're thankful. Because honestly, the game is significantly larger than I expected a discount product to be, with more meat on its bones than some full-price titles, and they probably could have gotten away with charging more for it, but they chose not to. At a time when some developers will nickel and dime gamers with microtransactions in full-price titles, or withhold significant and essential content to sell back as predatory DLC rather than use DLC to develop proper expansion content, we should celebrate when a developer does what we see with The Lost Legacy. As it is less of an investment than the previous games, this might be your perfect jumping on point if you're just now getting on board. And that about wraps it up for Uncharted: The Lost Legacy. If you made it this far, I want to thank you for watching and welcome you to my new channel. I don't intend for it to consist mainly of straightforward reviews like this, but I thought something like this would be a good way to ease myself into the medium. And if you guys want to see more content like this, be sure to let me know. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Hey, thanks for making it to the end of the video. If you want more, check out my website for plenty of text articles on games, film, and more, link in the description below. And if you want something a bit more fictional, it also has links to my novels in physical and digital formats. I'll see you next time.